show off increasingly close defense ties between Moscow and Beijing amid war in Ukraine. The Vostok 2022 exercise will be held September 1st to 7th in various locations in Russia's Far East and the Sea of Japan and involve more than 50,000 troops and 5,000 weapons units, including 140 aircraft and 60 warships, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. The drills will be conducted at 7 firing ranges in far eastern Russia and will engage troops from several ex-Soviet nations: China, India, Laos, Mongolia, Nicaragua, and Syria. The exercise isn't directed against any specific countries or military alliances and is purely defensive, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Fomin said at a meeting with foreign military attachés. He specified the naval drills would take part in the northern and central part of the Sea of Japan. Welcome to Savvy Economists. Today in this video we are going to be discussing the recent move by the China troops into the Russia territory for a joint massive military exercise amidst the war in Ukraine. Before we get into the video, like and subscribe to the channel and turn your notifications on. Speaking earlier this month, Russian President Vladimir Putin drew parallels between U.S. support for Ukraine and Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, saying both were part of alleged American efforts to foment global instability. Russia and China have held a series of joint war games in recent years, including naval drills and patrols by long-range bombers over the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea. Last year, Russian troops for the first time deployed to Chinese territory for joint maneuvers. Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping have developed strong personal ties to bolster a strategic partnership between the former communist rivals as both Moscow and Beijing face increasing tensions with the West. Even though Moscow and Beijing in the past rejected the possibility of forging a military alliance, Putin has said such a prospect cannot be ruled out. He also noted Russia has been sharing highly sensitive military technologies with China that help significantly bolster its defense capability. You may ask, what is the Vostok military exercise all about? Well, let's go back a little in history. In late August 2018, Russian Minister of Defense Sergei Shoigu said the exercise will be the largest to be held in Russia since Zapad 81 held by the Soviet Union in 1981. The Zapad exercises in 1981 involved about 100,000 to 150,000 troops and were the largest Soviet military exercises ever held. Shoigu later reported that nearly 300,000 troops would be taking part in the drills along with 36,000 vehicles and 1,000 aircraft. 80 warships are also involved in the exercise. Vostok 2018 was double the size of the previous exercise in the region, Vostok 2014. Sergei Shoigu, Russian Minister of Defense, boasted about the drills saying, "Imagine 36,000 military vehicles moving at the same time, tanks, armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, and all of this, of course, in conditions as close to a combat situation as possible." Deputy Defense Minister Colonel General Alexander Fomin reported that 91 foreign observers from 57 countries would be attending the exercise. Vostok 2018 took place during a time of deteriorating relations between Russia and the West. China and Mongolia too participated in the military exercise. Around 3,500 troops from the People's Liberation Army had taken part. Before the exercise, Beijing reported that its troops would be participating at the Tsugol training range in the Transbaikal region. The Chinese involvement was intended to improve Sino-Russian military relations, as well as to prevent Chinese concern about military exercises near their border. The joint exercise had also allowed Russia to demonstrate it was not militarily isolated. Again, before the exercise, there are reports that there will be sharing of information between the Russian armed forces and the People's Liberation Army on combat lessons from the Syrian civil war. The Vostok 2018 military exercises, which have earned an international status, will be held in Russia on September 11th through September 15th. The drills will involve troops from Russia's eastern and central military districts, the Northern Fleet, airborne landing troops, long-haul and military transport aviation. Servicemen from China and Mongolia will join at one of the stages. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said earlier it will be the biggest training exercise in the past 37 years, with about 300,000 troops and more than 1,000 warplanes, helicopters, and drones taking part. The scale and scope of Vostok 2018 is unprecedented for modern Russia, but no surprise. The giant drill is clearly meant as a show of strength by Vladimir Putin and his military, a demonstration that despite Western sanctions, including against the defense sector, the country remains defiant. It's also a reminder that while Russia is seen as a hostile and aggressive force in the West, Moscow has long seen NATO encroachment as the threat. President Putin's spokesman argued that Vostok was essential in what he called a very aggressive and unfriendly international context. It's how he defended the presumably giant bill for such a giant event, too, at a time when Russians are protesting furiously against a reform of the pension system they're told is critical because social spending is unsustainable as it stands. At a meeting of Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) military heads on August 24th in Tashkent, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that Russia would be increasing the readiness of Russian forces in Central Asia in the context of continued instability in Afghanistan. According to TASS, Shoigu said, "For our part, we are increasing the combat readiness of Russian military bases in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, as well as other response forces for possible crisis situations." He said Afghanistan remains a serious security challenge in Central Asia. In the country, against the backdrop of the ongoing armed confrontation, the socio-economic situation is deteriorating, the ideology of religious radicalism is being implanted, drug trafficking and cross-border crime are flourishing. None of the issues cited by Shoigu are particularly novel. Indeed, they have featured in Russian and Central Asian statements about Afghanistan for the last 2 decades. Concerns about religious radicalization and drug trafficking, especially, have fed wide-ranging investments into Central Asian border services and motivated tight control of religious and political expression in Central Asia. That said, with the U.S.-led withdrawal of American and NATO forces in August 2021 and the return of the Taliban to power, concerns have grown that Afghanistan could once again become a safe harbor for terrorists. Back to Shoigu's recent statements, it's unclear precisely what he means by increasing combat readiness of Moscow's forces in Central Asia, and how that relates to or differs from Lyakhin Frolov's 2021 comments to the same effect. It may mean increased alert with regard to Afghanistan or increased activities, but it may also be just signaling on the part of Russia. At present, the Russian military is bogged down in Ukraine, fighting 6 months into a war Moscow likely believed would be much shorter. In announcing the upcoming Vostok 2022 War Games, which will involve military forces and observers from Algeria, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Laos, Mongolia, Nicaragua, Syria, and Tajikistan, Russia said it was sending 50,000 troops to participate. Reuters noted that the 50,000 Russians is far below the reported 300,000 that participated in the exercise back in 2018, which may have been an exaggeration. The 50,000 number may also be an inflated figure. One Polish analyst, Konrad Muzyka, told Reuters, "It's just Russia pretending everything is fine and they still have the capability to launch a large-scale military exercise with China. But in reality, I think the scope of this exercise, especially from a ground force perspective, is going to be very, very limited." The joint communique that was issued after the recent SCO defense ministers meeting hones in on Afghanistan, the defense ministers believed that settling the situation in Afghanistan without delay is one of the key factors in preserving and strengthening security and stability within the SCO space. What do you think of the Russia and China joint military exercise during these times of global tensions between Russia, Ukraine,